Hello, our samurais, and welcome back to the dojo. That's our new expression. I think that's how we should start every video. Welcome back to the dojo. This class, well, if you made it this far, congratulations. We're now in lesson 9. Lesson 9 will focus on loops and how to use them. For those of you who don't know, loops are elements in programming that let us repeat a certain action according to a particular condition. All right, we're going to be looking at for loops, and we're going to be looking also at while loops and some statements that we can use to control how loops themselves work. We're also going to be looking at if and else statements inside loops. So there's a lot of stuff that we'll be looking at today. We're going to go through some very simple examples, and hopefully this will give you a nice idea of how to use for loops, how to use while loops, etc. This, you can later combine all this into creating functions, right, which we'll cover in a different class further ahead, but it's gonna be a very, very, very interesting class. Now, to start, please open up the file called myscript.r or whatever name you gave it, and the file that you've been using for this class all along. Please open that one, and then we're going to be creating a new section called, let's say what we should call it, loops. By the way, I forgot to say let's get to it, which is something that I tend to say every time. So two things that I now need to say are welcome back to the dojo, and the other one is let's get to it, together with class dismissed, which is how I usually end up the videos. Okay, anyway, here we go. So we're gonna create a new section. We're gonna call it loops, and I don't think we need to load any libraries, but just in case, I don't think we're gonna be using them, and we're not gonna be using any of our previous data either. So we're gonna be using just just base R. We're gonna be making our own things right now. So the first thing that I'm gonna start with is with, give me a second. Probably let's start with print, a function called print. Why do we start with this? Because we want to be printing some stuff inside the for loop. So what does print do? Remember to check what a function does. You can do this, and there it goes. Print prints its argument and returns it invisibly via invisible x. It's a generic function, which means that the new printing methods can be selected for new classes. Okay, that was complex. But that was not very clear. Let's just see what print does. Print 1, or let's say, what is this? I'm not gonna do hello world because that's boring. What is this? Right? That's a question. Okay. Then print will just basically print something to the console, right? So we're gonna be using this print. Okay. So just easy like that. Next, we're gonna be looking at what should we do? I think we should probably go into if and else. Okay, yeah, let's go into if and else. So we already know print. So in order for us to use if else, we need to have something to compare against, right? So let's say we're gonna create a new variable called var1. Then we're gonna be assigning this the value of 5. So var5 is already here in our environment. Oh, by the way, let me make this big. I forgot about that. That could have been quite annoying just to keep watching everything tiny. Sorry about that, guys. I'll be much more careful next time. Okay. Now that everything's full screen, let's continue. So we have here var1, and we're gonna use an if statement. Now, previously, I think we used some of the if-else statement when we were looking at, I believe, case when and if else, but here we're gonna use the base if from R. So how do we do that? We type if, and then it says snippet, right? If you click tab, it'll say snippet. Let's choose that condition. Something happens, then let's say that if var1 equal is greater than, let's say, 1, then let's print yes. Okay, so var1 has a value of 5. 5 is greater than 1, then it's gonna print yes. Now if we wanted to add, and this is a very, very simple if, right, and we have no else condition. What if we wanted to add an else condition? Well, to add an else condition, we just have to type in here else, then open the curly braces, press enter, have it like this, else, then if it's not greater than 1, then we need to print here no. So let's make this 0, and there we go. If var1 is greater than 1, it's going to print yes, else it's going to print no. Is there anything else to it? No. Honestly, there isn't. Yeah, it's just as simple as that. Very, very, very simple. Just remember, you use if, then you can use the snippet. If you forget to about the snippet, well, you can just write if, then the parenthesis, type your condition inside, curly braces, type what happens inside. If you want to add an else, you can add here the new condition, print no. You can also add, for example, I think you can also add another if inside here. Else, let's try that. Let's see what happens. If var less than let's say 0, print less than 0. Otherwise it'll print it'll print no. So let's see, let's execute this. Oh, let's say, oh, I have something here, atomic and list types. Oh, sorry, I forgot to save R1 here. There we go. So 0 is not less than 0, so it's gonna print no. Let's do -1 here. Actually, -1. Yep, there it goes. And then, oh well, of course, here we have a bit of a problem that you noticed already, and that was an issue, right? My mistake, you could call it. It's basically just going back to print no here. So probably we want to say else print no, and this should hopefully solve it. Okay, there we go. Now everything flows properly, right? We'll make this 0. It's gonna print, well, actually, let's make this 1. Okay, so let's see if var1 is greater than 1. Well, this is greater than 0. No, so it goes here. Is it greater than 0? Is it less than 0? No, 0 is not less than 0, so it'll print no. Yeah, that's correct. So that's basically how you can use if and else statements, and you can nest them. You can nest as many if else's as you want, but it can get quite complicated. Right? When are we gonna be using if else statements? Well, if you're creating a custom function, you might want to add if and else, of course. Or if you're developing a Shiny application, you will also probably use some if else statements for certain things inside your code. So that's the place where you would be using them. if you're analyzing data and you want to do something based on the variables or the data contained within a variable of your data frame, then it's usually better to just case when and if else. So just keep that in mind. Know when you should be using if else like this, and when you should probably just stick to using the Dippler function of if else or case when. Okay, next, what is it that we need to look at next? Next, we need to look at for loops. Yes, let's look at for loops. So, like I said, a for loop is a loop that will repeat an instruction a set amount of times based on how long you want to set it to repeat. And to create a for loop, we can use for. We use the word for. No, not formaldehyde. For control. No, it's not this one. I was hoping for the snippet to come. Let's see if for well, it's okay, we couldn't find it, but to write it down, basically you write it like this. For I, let's call I in 1 to 10, let's say, and then let's add braces, and this is our base condition, right? So we're setting a variable here called I, and then it's gonna run from 1 to 10. And then basically that's it. If we want to see how that looks like or what this particular for loop creates, we can always print I and then see what happens. Hopefully it works. There we go. So it basically print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's basically how we use a for loop. You can also notice that the variable I has been created here also, and it has the value of 10, which was the last value that it did. You know, it went from 1 to 10, and 10 was the last value, so that's why it's showing 10 in there. I still want to know why. How come? Ah, there we go. So for some reason I was not getting the for snippet here. There we go. So we need to provide a variable and then a vector, right? So you can also do that. Remember, you can always type for and then the snippet, and then you can just write stuff inside. So I'm gonna delete this. And that's basically the for loop, and we can do interesting things with for loop. We can combine it, for example, with our if, right? So let's do something interesting here. So it's gonna be in this particular for loop, we're gonna be iterating between 1 and all the way to 10, right? So let's add an if statement here. If, let's say I is equal to 5, then I want you to print let's say we're gonna use a paste here. Paste, we're gonna do I, and then we're gonna say woohoo, and then that's it. Well, let's make it a bit more complicated. Else, we're gonna print paste I we're sad that it was not 5. Okay, so let's see how that looks like once we execute. There we go. So now we have a combination, right? We're iterating from the variables from 1 to 10. And with the if statement, we're saying, hey, if I equals 5, I want you to execute this other code where it says like 5, woohoo. Otherwise, right? So we created that. Now, you can also do, let's say, we're going to be looking into nested loops a little bit forward, but you can also control the flow of for loops. So there's a way in which you can skip things or break the operation completely. So let's say that we wanted to stop once I equals 5. We want to print 5, woohoo, but we don't want the rest. So how would you do that? How can you control the flow of a for loop? Well, you have some control statements, which are the next statement and the break statement, right? So let's see how that would look like. So let's say that we want to break this. So we would just type break in here, and we can add, say like, well, let's see. You can add break here, and then it should probably stop at 5. Let's see if that's true. There we go. So now we have here 4 goes from 1 to 10, yes, but once it's equal to 5, once I is equal to 5, it'll print woohoo, and then right after printing this, it will execute the break statement, and it'll just stop the execution of the loop, right? And then it doesn't even execute it just stops executed completely. So there's a way in which you can stop execution of something once you reach, let's say, a particular condition. If you wanted, you could do it like that. You could say, hey, if fish is equal to 5, then break. I don't want you to continue this operation. And that's very, very useful if you're creating some sort of custom function to do some kind of data crunching for you. Based on a particular condition, you wanted to say like, hey, I want you to stop once you reach this. That's one way of doing it, or once you resolve this. Besides break, there's another statement used for control that is called next. So here, what we're gonna do is, and let's copy this. I don't want to type it all over again. So we're gonna say that if I is equal to 5, then instead of printing woohoo, we're just gonna say next. We're gonna omit the print completely, and then let's see what happens. There we go. So with next, you basically skip that. We're choosing to skip that iteration, right? It says like, hey, it's equal to 5. Go to the next one. Now this is a bit of a, let's say, not the greatest example, right? Because anyway, we would have continued to the next iteration, and there's nothing that is being printed, right? If I write here, for example, print, and actually let's just copy this one. Let's see what happens. If we do it like this statement should execute first, so it should probably go to the next one, but we'll see. There we go. So this is a much clearer and better example. So here we're making it once it is equal to 5, it'll go to the next. It executes this next, and it doesn't execute whatever comes below it. So this, you can forget about it. It's not gonna execute. Now if we change this like this, my gut tells me that it'll probably execute. Yeah, see, there you go. Now it executes. So it is important that you remember in scripting that things are executed in basically line by line in order, right? So line 196 will execute before line 197. So make sure that you keep that in mind. You might run into an issue where you're using next after everything, and then you're saying like, whoa, why is the code still executing? Well, because you put that next after all the code executed. So it's very important that you remember the order in which you write your code, and remember that it executes basically in that order. Line by line 196 executes before line 197. Line 197 executes before line 198. Okay. Now, besides that, the break statement and the next statement, we also have we can also have nested loops. But before we do a nested loop, let's go to the other type of loop that exists, and that is called a while. While. So let's say that while condition, let's say I less than 11, print help. Now I'm making a mistake here on purpose. Well, at least I think I am. We already have I here. I is 10, so 10 is definitely less than 11, and then it's gonna print help. Now let's say this. So let's see what happens if we just do this. Like I said, while will continue to execute. That's important. While will continue to execute until the condition here is no longer met. So the moment that I becomes greater than 11, it'll stop execution. That's very important. There we go. So what is happening here? We see that it just keeps going. Help, 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 help. It just keeps printing and printing and printing and printing. Yeah, we definitely did something wrong here. And I gave you a hint earlier when I said that, you know, as long as this condition is met, it'll continue to execute. And in this case, I is always 10. We're not changing I or anything, right? So it'll continue to execute and go on forever and ever and ever and ever. How do we stop it? Well, you can press escape, or you can also press the stop button here to stop the execution, interrupt R. So either press escape on your keyboard or press the stop button over here. So let's stop it. Okay, so we made a mistake there. Then how can we use this properly? Okay, before we go into the while loop, here we said while loop. Let's call this the for loop. Before we go into the before we go into a while loop, I'm just gonna make I back. Let's start at 1, and then I want this to be while I less than 11, actually less or equal to 10. I want it to print help, and after printing help, I want to do I equal I plus 1. Or you can also say I equal I plus 1. I prefer to use the assignment operator, but that's up to you. So we have reset the value of I to 1. And now let's see what happens. There we go. So we have 10 helps. Basically, once I became 11, it stopped the execution of the while loop. So the while loop is very, very useful when you want something to run and you don't know when that condition will be met, right? Let's give a concrete example of this. Let's say that you have a box with a volume of 10, and you're putting different things, different items with different volumes inside that box, right? And the volume of those items that you're putting in, let's say it's random, but it's usually a random number between 0 and 1, right? So technically you don't know how many items you're going to be placing inside this box, right? But one thing you know is that every time you put an item inside this box, you're going to decrease the available volume inside this box. So you could use a while loop and say like, hey, you know, while the volume of the box, which you know the initial volume, is greater than 0, continue to execute this. And inside of the while loop, you can say like, hey, you know, my current volume of the box is this minus the random size of that thing, and it'll keep executing. So that's a way in which you can say like, okay, I don't know how many times it'll execute, but you know that at some point it'll just stop because the volume available will go negative and the while loop will just stop. That was a bit more complicated to imagine the example, but yeah, that's a way you could use it, let's say in some real life situation, let's say. In any case, it's easy. You know, you designate a variable, assign a condition, make sure you have a way to increase or decrease that variable inside your while loop, and then the while loop will keep executing until you reach that condition. Okay? Very, very simple. Now, our last topic today is gonna be nested loops. Nested loops. So you can have a for loop, and also you can have any number of for loops inside a for loop. You can have a for loop and then inside a while loop, or a while loop and then inside a for loop. You can have a for loop and then inside another for loop and then another for loop and then inside of that a while loop. You can nest as many things as you want. Of course, every time you nest things, it becomes a little bit more complicated to follow through with logic. So make sure that you don't over abuse the nesting of for loops, right? But we're going to do a very simple example here. We're going to do a for loop, and we're just going to print, let's say, a multiplication table. Yeah, 4. So we're going to use the snippet. We're going to call it x in this case in vector. Let's say 1 to 10. And then we're going to do another for loop. We're going to call this y. And then the vector is going to be 1 to 10. And then here we're going to do a print like we used. And then we're going to use paste, our MVP. Remember paste, amazing function. Remember to use it. Paste, well, paste 0 will collapse all the spaces. So maybe you want to use paste 0. Yeah, let's use paste 0. And here we're going to say x. And we're going to do times y equal x times y. We're not going to use any separator, so if we did this correctly, and I hope we did, otherwise, we'll have to spend some time fixing it. But what's going to happen here is that we're going to be going through iterations, right? We're going to go for iteration 1, and we're going to say like, hey, 1, and then it's going to enter in here, and it's going to say like, hey, y from 1 to 10. So it's going to say 1 times 1 equal 1, 1 times 2 equal 2, and it's just going to keep going until it reaches 10. Once it reaches 10, it'll go into the next loop, bigger loop, which would then be a 2, and then go back here inside, and then repeat until we all finish from 1 to 10 and 1 to 10. So let's see how that looks. There we go. Beautiful, right? Perfect. We have 1 times 1 equal 1, 1 times 2 equal 2, and then we go all the way until we finish with 10 times 10 equals 100. So that's how you use, you can use nested loops. You can, like I said, you can nest for loops with while loops with for loops, any number of loops that you want. You can do for loops here, another for loop here, and then you could have another for loop just next here. So they don't have to be all inside of each other, right? You can have them in parallel, let's say inside the big for loop, and you can do as many as you want. You can also use, of course, the control statements and the if else's, etc. So let's say that here we say if, and then if x is equal to 5, then let's do a next, and then let's see what happens in here. So when it went equal to 5, and actually let's make this shorter. Let's make it from 1 to x equals from 1 to, no, yeah, 1 to 10 is fine, but let's shorten this one to 1 to 5, so it's much more manageable. Yeah. Okay, so here we see that we skipped 5. We went from 4 all the way to 6. And then you can also use the break statements and all these other things we learned today in this session. Yeah, I think for today, that's basically it. It was a shorter lesson than usual, right? But for loops, break statements, next statement, these are very powerful things that you should know and you should keep in your arsenal once you want to develop much more complicated things, and you will definitely be needing them once we go into much more complicated topics such as Shiny app development. Then you will need this. But in the meantime, please remember that they exist. We're not going to touch them in a while, right? But we will be coming back to them at some point to do some of the things in Shiny app development. But yeah, keep it in mind. Remember, you can also use them in functions. I guess at some point we're going to be using a function to create some cool stuff, and we'll be revisiting this. So even sooner than Shiny app development, even before we make it there, we're going to be definitely revisiting for loops and next statements and all this kind of stuff later on. So with that said, our classes come to an end, right? I hope you enjoyed it today. I hope you learned something new and you continue in this journey with me to learn R programming. Remember, if you like the class, please remember to like and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. Please tell your friends if they're struggling with programming or they want to learn programming and they don't know where to start. Our SamuRai Lab is the place, right? I'm here for you guys and I'll keep making these videos. So yeah, please tell your friends, like and subscribe. With that said, thank you a lot for your time. Thank you for still watching these videos. And that's it. Class dismissed.